This video I will teach you the Scotch game opening. So this opening starts off after these moves e4, e5, knight f3, and then usually knight c6 from black, and then we play this move d4, immediately striking in the center. And this is by far my favorite e4, e5 opening with white. The most popular response here for black is to go ahead and capture this central pawn on d4. And the reason why is simply because we already have this double threat right now. So if black just makes any other move, of course, for example, something like knight f6 wouldn't be good because we can immediately capture here in the center. And there are some other lines for black as well, lines where they can protect, but we will take a look at that later. So most players with the black pieces, almost everybody actually, captures here on d4. If they do so, we're going to capture back with the knight. And usually you will get this line after this knight exchange and then queen d4. If they go for an early knight exchange like this, of course, this will also lead to the same position. And this is the first line we're going to take a look at. Of course, there are also many different options from black, which we will take a look at later. So we already have a centralized queen and a pawn in the center, and black basically doesn't have a single developed piece. And that is the whole point of this opening. We will try to get a lead in development. So play active moves, developing moves, attacking moves, and we will launch an attack on the enemy king side. Many players make the mistake here of going immediately for this move knight f6. But if they do so, this is really annoying because you can push this pawn to e5, attack their knight, and it's already a little bit annoying. Where are they going to go with the knight? Actually, one of the best moves is to just go back here. So that's why they should play this move d6 before developing the knight. Of course, if they go here, you can just capture it for free. The same goes for those two squares. And sometimes they will try to play knight h5. This is actually played a lot, but this move is also losing because of g4. And now you can see the knight actually has nowhere to go. So we will be able to capture this knight for free. Sometimes they can also try, instead of moving the knight, to first do some kind of counter attack with a move like c5. If they do so, just move the queen to this square on e3. Still, we have this attack on the knight. Also, the queen is lined up with the king. They might go for this, but then you can just move the queen again to e4, attack the knight, and we actually wanted to have our queen on e4. But in this position, after they play c5, of course, we cannot go here because of the knight. So we are actually happy here to have the queen on e4. That may be something like knight b6, and you can just develop, and here white already has a winning advantage, even though there is nothing concrete. But as you can see, we have these pieces developed central space, so we are already winning. Another move you might sometimes see is this move queen e7, trying to prevent us from capturing, but this is also not so good. You can simply play a move like bishop e3. Again, you still have this attack. It's really annoying for black. If they go here, well, g4 is still the plan. And the best move for black is actually just to go back. So that's also not so good. And all of this just to say that black really should play this move d6 before playing knight f6. But in many of these lines, black will make the mistake of allowing you to go for this early e5 push, gaining a tempo on the knight. Here we develop knight to c3. Usually you will get the move knight f6. We're going to play this move f3. And our entire plan in this opening as white is to castle on the queen side. So we're going to castle on the queen side, and that is why we play this move f3. f3 strengthens our center, but it also helps us to go for this early g4 and h4 push and an early kingside attack. This f3 moves also takes away this square g4 from both the knight and the bishop. So that is why I prefer playing this move f3 here. Of course, there are other moves you can play as well, but I think f3 is the best. It's just a safe move, strengthen your center, and also take away this g4 square. Black will probably play something like bishop e7. We can develop the bishop to e3, and that is also nice because if you were to develop the bishop here, sometimes it can be annoying if black just attacks you. And that's why if you play f3 first, now of course this is no longer possible. And then black can castle, white can castle, and we have this starting position. But as you can already see here, even though this position is equal, we already have this bishop and this queen lined up, and at the same time we will have a quick push here, and black will have a really slow attack on our king. Black will often go for this move c5 and many of these variations because our queen is centralized and they are forcing us to move. That's not really a problem, we can just drop back, and this even helps in some lines to put some more pressure. And then black's only real plan is to go for this queenside attack with b5, b4, a5, moves like this. And we are immediately going to counter-attack him on the king side. This is going to be a really dynamic one. And in positions like this, it's important that you keep playing active and attacking moves. Don't play any slow developing moves. For example, like bishop here, or a random pawn move. You want to be attacking, because if you are too slow, black will just crush you on this queen side. So g4, b5, and then we can play g5, attacking this knight. And this is already really annoying for black. I would say knight d7 is actually the most played move, but knight d7 is already losing. There are also some other variants that I'm going to take a look at. If they, for example, play knight h5, which is also played a lot. So actually the most played move is knight e7, which loses, and then the second most played move is knight h5, which also loses. Just to show that many people with the black pieces don't know what to do here. So if they play knight h5, I would recommend going for this with the bishop, because we are going to threaten pushing f4, and after we push f4 we will have an attack on the enemy knight. They can defend with something like g6, f4, and you can already see we have this attack. Maybe they go back with the knight, h4. They can always try to counter-attack us, doesn't really matter. We have this beautiful square in the center of the board, and then we will play h5. And just to show you, this variation with knight h5 was really bad for black, because black lost a lot of time, and we already have such an advanced attack here on the enemy king. For example, after this move, we can take here, take, and you can already see, for example, a move like rook h6, and this is just devastating for black. Sometimes they also play knight d7, which is what I'm going to continue with, because that is the most played move. Also, this move b4 as a move, because we are attacking their knight, they are trying to do this counter attack on our knight. And if you get this, I would recommend to just move the knight back here, and this will actually help us, because in many lines our knight will go to g3. And now this knight that was here a little bit passive is suddenly on the king side and is ready to also help attack. For example, after a variation like this, and you can see here we already have quite the attack, and our knight is also helping. But as I said, most of the time you will get this move knight d7, which is even worse than what I just showed you. So knight d7, here you can go in with the knight, and that is really beautiful, because this d5 square is really important for our knight, and it was always being protected by their knight on f6, but now we were able to chase it away. We can play our knight in, and this will make for many annoying lines, because you can see we already have so many pieces lined up here on this d file, and this d6 pawn is really weak. For example, if we just capture this bishop, we will be able to also win this pawn, and this will stop the black attack, because everything is just gonna fall apart once they lose this d6 pawn. The most played move here is probably something like b4, and then you can just take and win this pawn in the center. And even though this is a little bit less interesting, okay, we lost the queens, the attack is going to be a little bit slower, this is just going to be an easy endgame for white, because what is this? What are all these pieces doing here? Not really anything great. At the same time, we have these bishops attacking, we have this rook attacking. We can always consolidate with something like f4, h4. So, and these lines, you can stop your queen side attack, your king side attack, and actually just destroy this queen side as well and pick up a lot of material. Then the next line I wanted to take a look at is after they capture here. Let's say they play a move like knight f6, because of course they don't have to immediately capture here. They can always play a move like knight f6 first. Then we play knight c3, because of course they are attacking this, so we have to defend it. So that is just our main idea. And many players will also go for this bishop c5 move. This is one of the most played variations. Of course, if they ever end up capturing and playing something like d6, we will go back to our first line. So the first line I showed you is the most important one, because many of your variations will end up in that line, even with different move orders. But here we will take a look at this move bishop c5. and they are trying to just put double pressure on your knight, which can be annoying and force you to make a move. But here we're gonna set up a beautiful trap with this move bishop e3. And the most played move here by black is to castle. And castling immediately loses the game. Why? Well, there's a beautiful tactic here. We actually have a discovered attack on this bishop. So we can move the knight here, capture their knight, and also attack their queen. And if they recapture us, we just capture this bishop for free. Even after some exchanges, and then for example rook here, f3, you can see we just have an extra bishop in this variation. So after they castle, which is the most played move, you are already immediately winning. Of course, if you capture here, they can also capture this bishop, but then you can just take the queen, and yeah, it doesn't really matter, they don't have anything here. If they capture the knight, for example, you can just recapture here, and now you have an extra queen, which is of course even better. One of the best options for white is probably just to for black is just to exchange here in the center. Sometimes they also play this move d6, trying to protect the bishop, but if they play this, you can always capture, again with a threat on the enemy queen. They will recapture, capture, and just take a look at this position from black. They have tripled pawns, so this is just going to be losing. You can capture here, castle with tempo, with a check, and you can start attacking all of these pawns and picking them up for free. So of course a really easy game here for white. Sometimes they can also play something like bishop back here. Doesn't really matter, you can just continue with your regular plan as always. But we're going to take a look at what to do if they in this position decide to capture the knight. So if they capture the knight, you can just recapture with the bishop. That is why we played the bishop here in the first place. Usually you will get this exchange, and this is pretty similar to our previous positions where we can do this e5 push. So if black just castles, which is of course not so good, you can do this e5 push, and again it's really annoying for them. We can castle here and we will have a quick attack. A little bit better for black is to play d6, but this is already a devastating position again because of castles, and then even here you can play this move e5, because of course capturing doesn't work, otherwise they would lose this, and this is even a back rank checkmate as well. So e5 is really annoying for black to face in these lines. For example, e5 here, they will have to go back with the knight. f4, we are protecting this. Again, they cannot capture of course because the queen would be hanging. And they can try something like bishop here to attack our rook. It doesn't really matter, you can move the rook up. And of course this position is also completely winning for white already at this point. Since we have the bigger center, we have a quick attack on the enemy king, we have better developed pieces. And for example, something like bishop here attacking this pawn. They can always try to capture here, then you will just have a new attack here on this bishop. So they will need to move it. And then often in these lines you have tricks, because you can threaten checkmate here and also threaten this pawn at the same time. And if they solve the checkmate, you can just capture this for free. For example, something like this. And that is where I will leave this position. But against bishop c5 and these lines, often they will make different mistakes earlier on that will lead to either tripled pawns or big material loss, and you will have a quick win. If they try to be more resilient, you might get a position like this, which of course is also winning for white. Next up, we're going to take a look at this variation where they attack our pawn, we defend it, and then they play bishop b4. And this is probably one of the better lines for black if you want to play against this. Because pinning this knight is a little bit annoying. Now this pawn is also undefended, so we have to be careful. If you were to just make a silly move, of course you would be losing this because you cannot recapture. Here I would recommend to just capture their knight. They have to respond to this. Of course, if they take like this, you can capture the queen and they can no longer castle. So they will capture like this, and then you can just play a move like bishop d3 and everything is safe. It doesn't really matter if they capture you here. You have doubled pawns, but you also have this open file and this pawn supporting the center. So no need to worry about that. Castles, and here we are actually gonna castle kingside ourselves as well. Because we always know that this might open up in the future, so you don't want to castle and get your king facing off with this enemy rook. So castling kingside, something like d5, takes, bishop developing, pinning the knight, also trying to go for some tricks against this pawn. But if black is smart, you might get something like c6. And this is just the main idea you have to remember in these lines. I won't give you any more detailed variations because this is about equal. Here you can see we have some chances on the enemy king side, but nothing too serious. Everything is defendable from the black side. So the basic plans here are to just play something like h3, stopping this bishop, playing this move, pawn to a3, developing your rook, sometimes going for something here with the queen, but nothing too serious here. This is a pretty equal situation, so probably one of the best defenses from black. Then we also have this line where early on in the game they play this move d6 instead of developing the knight. Well, if they do this, you can always capture if you really want to and then go for this exchange of queens, but since the queens are already off the board, this can be a easy draw for black, since okay, the king is in the center here, but since there are not that many pieces left, it will be hard to attack them. What I like to play instead is knight c3, just developing your knight to the center. Again, they can always capture this and then go for something like this, but those are the lines that we already had a look at before. So yeah, those lines are nothing to worry about. If they capture you, also if they capture with the pawn or with the knight, that leads to the same position. They might play something like bishop g4, which is the most played variation here, trying to pin this to potentially threaten this pawn in the center. If they do this, you can actually go for a counter pin with the bishop here, also threatening, if they are not careful, to push this pawn to d5 and just straight up win this knight. So you might get a move like a6, but you can always just capture, and here you will see if they just recapture, of course, there is this, and boom, we're winning this pawn in the center, and all of this on the queen side will also soon be falling. So the best line for black is to do this intermediate capture and then play something like this, castles, knight here, bishop here. But you can already see here, white has 3 developed pieces and a good central pawn, black has a destroyed queen side and only 1 knight, which is also pinned. So not a really good position for black. In this variation, often you will get a move like bishop e7, and I actually advise exchanging here on f6, because we are giving them just a dark squared bishop against our knight, but there are so many weak light squares here, and we have a knight which can attack both the dark and the light squares. They have a bishop which can only defend the dark squares. So we will have a strategic battle here for different color squares. For example, rook here, queen has to move, and then even things like this, b3, just because we want to put everything on the light squares and play against this enemy bishop. They can try something like castles, and often you will even have your knight here, sometimes play a move like c4 and just keep many of your pieces on the light squares, and you will have a nice strategic battle here. Then just some sidelines to take a look at. Sometimes here they can try to do a counter attack with this move d5, which is possible. If they do this, well, I recommend just capturing this pawn here because it is free currently, and you could get something like this, and you can always go for this exchange of queens. And this is one of those positions, as I said, this can be a draw if black plays well and defends well. But at the same time, as white, we are already up a bit in development and we will still be able to castle. So those are some slight advantages you might have. Something like bishop here, pinning the knight. It's best to just stop this pin. Something like captures. Often you will castle queenside here as well, because you can win a tempo on the enemy king. But the enemy king can actually go back to e8 or even e7. And it's a little bit hard. What are you going to do here? There is no immediate winning attack, but white is of course definitely better here in these lines as well. I also want to show you this line where they capture early on and then immediately go for this bishop c5. So this is different from the other line we looked at, because here the knight is not on f6 yet. Well, I recommend playing this move bishop e3, just simply because if they play knight f6, they are still walking in a trap, because you can capture here, And of course, if they recapture, there is this variation we have looked at before, where you win the bishop. And if they capture your bishop, of course, you can capture the queen. So that is why I would play bishop e3, and just basically to bait this move. And this is the third most played move by black, just to bait them into this trap. Black can also, of course, exchange. Go for this, and then sometimes they can offer you the queen. Sometimes they will play a move like knight f6, which leads into the variations we have seen as well with the early e5. Not really a good line for black. So the best thing for black to do here is actually to play queen f6. But this is a pretty theoretical move. I don't think you will get this a lot, especially if you're playing online. But I just want to show you, if they do this, their goal is to, of course, put a lot of pressure here in the center. And the best move is c3, because you are blocking this diagonal for the queen and also protecting your knight. Something like knight e7, bishop c4, castles, castles. And we're just going to play king side castles here. And this is also going to be more of a strategic battle, where we are going to be the ones with a little bit more central presence. And our queen is safer here than the enemy queen is here. And that is the entire goal. For example, d6, you can always exchange at some point. Basically, I would say after you have castled, I would just exchange. If they ever exchange themselves earlier, of course, you just capture back with your bishop. And sometimes you will get a nice center. So for example, if they capture here, of course, you can capture with the bishop or with the pawn even. Doesn't really matter, but I just want to show you, often you will get this beautiful center and you can develop your knight. If they never exchange, you can always capture them yourselves. Capture this and give them these doubled pawns. This is no really big weakness, because they can always play b6, bishop b7, but still it's a little bit annoying to play as black. And we as white even have plans with a move like f4. f4 just trying to strengthen our center and play this quick e5 move. For example, bishop here, and of course you can capture, but I would say something like e5, attacking the queen, the queen has to move, and then you can develop the knight here, protecting the bishop. Often in these lines we are kind of baiting this rook move here, then we can capture and we can just play the queen out. And this is going to be more of a strategic battle, as I said, where we have the center, black has these doubled pawns, we can fight for these open files, but with perfect play I think black should be able to draw this. At the same time, often it's harder to play from the black side than it is from the white side, because we have these easy looking moves, we have the better squares for our pieces. Then the last thing I want to check is this Petrov defense, which is what to do if they play knight f6 instead of knight c6. Well, you can just play knight c6 yourself, and of course if they go for something like this, we can still play the Scotch, so there's no problem in that. If they play something like bishop b4, you can always capture this pawn for free, takes. They are able to capture this one for free if they want to, but this is actually a poison pawn. So here black is just down material and they cannot capture this. If they do capture this, you can play something like queen here with a double attack. And capturing this is actually the most played move. About 1 in every 2 games in this position, black captures. And you just have this double attack. Of course, if they go back, you can capture here, rook f8, and this is already quite devastating for black. They can sometimes try something like the queen here to be a little bit sneaky, but still you can capture this, also protect your knight. Maybe something like queen f6, and this exchange, bishop g5. But of course you can already tell this is not what you want to have as black. Of course there are many more lines in the Petrov, but I won't go any deeper into those in this video. So definitely subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this, leave a like, leave a comment, I read all comments, and that's it for this video. As always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.